This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price you can get Truefire All Access for.
Now, the other day, Rhett uploaded a video called The Problem with AMP Modelers, or with all AMP Modelers that is not going anyway, no one's solving. And I thought it was a really interesting, kind of thought-provoking video, and I sort of did a video kind of looking at, have a look, how I think some of this stuff actually is not really even a problem in some ways. And in this video, I wanted to do kind of a video on the problem with tube amps, as I do think that these are a little bit more pronounced, certainly in my life where I live. If you're not familiar, I play in like cover bands around the southwest. I make videos in my bedroom, and you know, for a lot of gigs these days, most of the summer actually, I used a modeler, because a lot of professional gigs, that is basically what you're expected to do these days. So in this video, I wanted to get into a little bit of that and some other bits and pieces. Let me know if you're using a tube amp still, and congratulations if you are. You're having more fun, I imagine. There you go. Is that better?
That's better.
Right, so this is a Supro Airwave, which I did a video on, which they sent this amp over for me to check out. And in the intro, there's an output on here, which is, it's basically got a 2 notes load box in here. And I had an SM57 in front as well. So this is kind of like a more modern amp that is trying to solve some of the problems that have come up. It's not really a new problem per se, but, you know, this is also a problem that Meza Boogie were trying to solve with the cab clone. You know, you've got reactive loads, you've got 2 notes, you've got straightforward load boxes, you've got Fryette power stations, there's one down there. All of these are kind of, I think, acknowledging that the tube amp needs taming or adjusting for modern life, whatever that really means. You know, so whether it's at home, one of the most common things that I see people like asking on the internet is like, what attenuator would work with this amp? You know, how can I get this to sound good at home? I see that all the time. And you just think, okay, well, that's, again, just a thing saying, well, actually, a lot of these things, whether they're old amps or even modern amps, in many cases, something else is needed. So this is like a Tone King, if they've got their attenuator, right? Something else is needed, like just the tubes and the speakers, and the old sort of 50s, 60s, 70s designs are not sufficient for modern day, because we basically need things to be quieter. I think that's one of the main issues that we have, right? There is a speaker mute on this amp, and I think personally that it's something similar to, you know, on the Klon KTR, the buffer switch is labelled as almost always better, almost always worse. And I do think, as a guitarist, removing the speaker, and you try this for yourself, is almost always a little bit worse. So with this thing, I can turn off the speaker altogether, then you'd just be hearing. I do feel like I'm much more inclined to pick a lot quieter if I've got something giving me that kind of feedback of it. Right, and I think that is an unfortunate reality. Like, if you don't want to be selfish in 2025 on your gigs, then bringing that volume down on stage is almost always going to be better for everyone else, but in many cases going to be worse for us. I think you're going to get slightly less kind of guitar to amp interaction, which is actually a really quite a special thing in a lot of ways. I think most of us have an absolute love for actually playing with an amp when you get to do it. Certainly I do. I don't know if any of you guys are the same, but it is one of those things where these days, if you show up to a gig with an amp, they might look at you like you've brought a bag full of rotten salmon and be like, what are you doing? That there are 100% gigs like that, and even Rob Chapman was talking to Joey Z, who is a touring guitarist, and he was saying, like, the tour managers, it's not the artists that are really dealing with, you know, like a jobbing guitarist. It's going to be tour managers and stuff like that. And although you've got the option that you could use backline amps and stuff like that, they are basically encouraging you that really other guitarists are going to be using modelers on these gigs, digital devices, and that, I guess, is exactly what you'd expect when things are, you know, money is tight and, you know, you've got to travel around the world. So, you know, it really is a thing, apparently. It definitely is in my life where, you know, I show up to a gig, even like a Tonex cab or a Fender FR12, people are kind of like I'd prefer it if you didn't use that. And it just tends to be that is the case. And to the flip side of that, there's a reason that some people like myself and Jake, we still play this venue called the Ship in Lyme Regis. We're playing there on October the 10th, I think, or October the 11th, because that's a gig where we actually get to take our amps and make a bit of noise, and it's like a bit more of an old school type of gig. And it definitely feels that way when you're playing it. Jake's only like 24, I'm 36, so I have had some experience of being able to play with an amp and it being a thing, basically for my entire professional career, from 25 onwards, or like whenever it would have been, like 2015, 2014. So I remember going like on an electro, like pop, sort of, we did a few gigs. And at that point, I took a Kemper to one, and it was still relatively novel for people like at that stage, because the Kemper had only been out like 3 years. So folks would be like, "Oh wow, what's that?" And sound guys would be like, "What's that?" And they'd be like, "Oh, really? It was super easy to work with that." And so it's a thing that has taken a little bit of time to take over, but I get the sense really that it's fairly well taken over at this point, except for if you're in like the biggest sort of touring bracket, or like within certain like blues or stuff like that. Like John Mayer's getting to use an amp, right, if he wants to, but even some of the guys playing the Sphere are not allowed to apparently take their amps. You think of huge artists, if you're an original guitarist, whether it's someone like Aaron from Intervals, or Tosin Abasi, or people like that, there are going to be choices that you can make to take an amp or not. But I think in many of those cases as well, for like financial reasons potentially, it's still the case that a modelling might be more suitable. Aside from it being the case that just people don't want you to be that loud on stage anymore, there is a real downside to this. And myself and Jake, we were chatting about this the other day, and he kind of said to me, I've not had people coming up to me and sort of complimenting me anymore. And this is a thing that I've 100% noticed. Like, if you don't have any volume on stage as a guitarist, I don't think people hear you in quite the same sort of way. And particularly in the sort of gigs that I'm doing, but it even seems to be the case in professional gigs, like proper like stage gigs, is that drums, bass, vocals, even sax in one case that I saw, you'll hear those very clearly. But even when it comes time for the guitar to take a solo, it will be like not quite loud enough. It's what I've found, and I don't know why that is. But even like on a gig with Pliny, even Jack Gardner, even Bill Murray, even Sleep Token, even during like the moments where there's a guitar solo of Ben Jones playing with Jacob Collier, it's kind of like I could do with hearing that guitar louder. And that is, if you don't hear the guitar solos particularly loud, I don't think it's very impressive. To me, I think that might be part of what is so cool about seeing Robin Ford and Joe Bonamassa and people like that live, is that you can really hear everything very clearly. And even myself, like, I can listen to my own playing. If I've got a loud amp next to me, I play way softer, because I know that if I dig in hard, that thing's going to like tear my ears off. That's just at home. That's definitely also the case playing live too. And I think that is a little bit of the danger, that when you go down a route of like having way less stage volume, or modelling in general, is that we kind of, because we can't necessarily hear ourselves as well or quite the same, tend to over sort of pick and play harder. I've definitely noticed that myself, and I think that is one of the things that we don't talk about too much that may be worth discussing. The next thing that I think is going to be the problem is, like, even as the amp sort of, in many cases the amp hasn't evolved, so I think some of the most popular amps are still going to be old school type stuff. Like, even like Marshall took until this point to do some mods that were being done like in the 70s and 80s to their amps, right? So things are slowly moving in the amp world. And if you've got things like load boxes coming in now, maybe like the last 5, sort of 10 years, Rev Amp's been doing this sort of thing. But there are a few companies that are now building in load boxes, Mesa Boogie. But you think, even for me now, I looked this up, like where the guitar techs are, because like Project Music, our local shop, doesn't really sell many amps anymore. They used to sell Mesa Boogies, they used to sell quite a lot of stuff. They now pretty much only sell like some Fender amps and some Black Star stuff, like not much at all. And all of the amp techs, or a lot of the ones that I used to sort of know were around, there was someone sort of local who recently sadly passed away. There was a guy that I used to use near Exeter who kind of had like some health issues like Parkinson's. I don't know how he's doing, but yeah, he was struggling even sort of 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So there's maybe like 1, 2 or 3 guys in Devon, possibly. In Cornwall there seems to be some as well, and in Dorset there's like a very few, but we're talking like within sort of 200-300 mile radius. Is there 10 amp techs? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like there's like a great deal of them, and this is not getting any better. And so you think about, also, I was looking this up, like what is a Mesa Boogie warranty? What is the Supro warranty? This is covered under warranty for 1 year. And you think, actually, like in a lifetime of an amplifier, 1 year is basically nothing. So you do need a tech. And where are they going to be coming from is kind of my question for this. It's like, because I just don't see that people are not working on old TVs in the same way they used to, or old radios. Like that sort of technology is kind of going away. And those were some of the guys that were also working on tube amps, right? So I don't know. That to me is kind of a big problem with the amp world that is not getting any better. And I don't know how that gets solved. Maybe you end up shipping amps like further afield, like up the country or whatever. But to be honest with you, I think I was saying yesterday, my buddy Jake's got this Fender Dual Professional, like is it Bruce Zinke custom shop thing, like a great amp, sounds amazing, but has been to 2 different techs with it. At this point, it's with another tech, and at this point now, he's spent more money trying to get that amp fixed than he's ever earned using it. And if that continues to be a trend, like even with a relatively simple Fender amp, like what hope is there for amps that have things like load boxes built in, or amps that are complex like Mesa Boogies? Because it's the Fender amps that are apparently the ones that are easy to fix. And if the techs are either so inundated with stuff or have, well, whatever the issue seems to be, like why is it that like a Fender amp is befuddling sort of 2-3 techs? Maybe it is just because there's not as many experienced techs around. I don't know what that might be, but it's certainly something that even in our small community here, I've felt and noticed. So I think that is a bit of a problem that I don't know how we solve that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is there a solution to this? For me, I can just use a digital modeler, and 9 times out of 10, especially if I've got an FRFR with me, like a Tonex cab or a Fender FR12, I can have a really good time and enjoy playing. As long as there's stage volume from me, that tends to be the thing I need. And even if there isn't, and it's just an in-ear gig, those are much less enjoyable, but you can get by, right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. At home, an amp gets turned on, and some of these things are absolutely beautiful things, but I do worry a bit about, like, well, in 10 years from now, where are these things going to be getting serviced?